Hey there, ready for another deep dive?
Let's do it.
Today we're diving into the world of modern brand building with Aart Lensink.
Oh, I like him. He always has a fresh perspective.
This time we're looking at his book, Merken, bouwen met content.
Building brands with content, for those of us who haven't quite mastered Dutch yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, he doesn't disappoint. Lensink really digs into how brands are breaking through all the noise these days.
Yeah, it's not just about flashy billboards anymore, is it?
It's really not. He makes a super strong case that just relying on those in-your-face ads just doesn't cut it anymore.
Makes sense. Consumers are savvier, they want more.
Right. It's about connection, authenticity.
Totally. Think about brands like Tony Chocolonely, De Vegetarisch Lager, Rituals. They've all blown up, and none of them did it with just crazy ad campaigns.
They all have such strong brand identities. You just get it immediately.
And that's precisely Lensink's point. They nailed their brand story, and then, crucially, made sure to keep that consistent everywhere. No mixed messages, just one powerful story told consistently across the board.
It makes their marketing so much more impactful because it all feels connected.
Right. And that's where so many brands really miss the mark. They fall into that trap of having their advertising say one thing and their website say something completely different.
Totally. Or even just defaulting to those generic stock photos and forgettable taglines.
Like they're speaking two different languages.
Exactly. It's no wonder consumers are confused.
And that's where Lensink uses this analogy I love. He compares a crowded market to a field full of 7-year-olds playing soccer, where everyone just ends up in a big clump chasing the ball. No strategy, no clear positions, just chaos.
Oh, I can picture it perfectly. And no one really stands out in that mess.
Exactly. And he's saying brands need to ditch that approach and find their own space on that field, or as we call it in marketing, their own unique position on the perceptual map. Basically where they fit in the minds of their ideal customer.
So it's not just about being different, it's about being strategically different.
Right on. And that leads us to Lensink's emphasis on distinctiveness and building those strong brand assets we see everywhere. Those instantly recognizable elements like the ING lion, the NCOI pole vaulter, they convey a whole message in an instant.
They just stick with you.
Right. And they work because they're used consistently. Lensink argues that content shouldn't just live alongside these assets. It should be built upon them, with advertising amplifying that core message.
So if we're thinking about this like a house, Lensink is saying content isn't just the paint color, it's the foundation.
Exactly. And he backs this up with some really compelling real-world examples.
The one that really stood out to me was the Vermogens in Nederland campaign by ABN AMRO Mies Pearson.
Oh, yes. They really tackled a subject that so many shy away from wealth.
And they did it so well. They created a docuseries featuring real people, wealthy individuals from the Netherlands, talking about their lives and experiences.
It was so refreshing. They could have easily gone with actors or made it overly promotional, but they chose to be authentic.
And it worked. This approach got people talking about wealth in a way that felt relatable and human. They tapped into those universal truths that connect us all, and you know what? They didn't even need a traditional ad campaign to make a splash.
It proves that when you connect with your audience on a deeper, more genuine level, people pay attention.
Absolutely. But Lensink doesn't stop at visuals and stories. He also takes on the words we use. And let's just say he's not a fan of vague corporate jargon.
Who is these days?
Right. Instead, he challenges brands to find their unique voice, their own way of speaking to their audience, and to use language that's strong, evocative.
Think Nike's just do it. Simple, powerful, unforgettable.
So we've talked about content being king.
The foundation, remember?
Right, the foundation of the brand. But how do we actually build a brand with content? Where do we even start?
Well, Lensink dives deep into that. And one key takeaway, consistency is key.
Makes sense. It's not just about one viral video or a catchy tagline, right?
Exactly. You have to thread that brand story through every single piece of content you put out there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you become what Lensink hilariously calls firma las ideas.
The company of loose ideas.
Yep. And honestly, haven't we all seen brands like that? They jump on every trend, try to be everything to everyone.
Oh, absolutely. It's exhausting to watch.
Right. In the end, their audience is left clueless. Like, who are you and what do you actually stand for?
Exactly. Consistency builds trust, right? It shows you know who you are.
Totally. Which is why Lensink is such a strong advocate for sticking to that core narrative. Even if you're experimenting, trying new things, it always circles back to that central message.
They're like having a North Star. It keeps you oriented.
I like that. But, and here's the thing, This doesn't mean clinging to outdated tactics just for the sake of consistency.
Right, because the world of marketing is changing faster than ever.
Exactly. But Lensink also reassures us. He says, the fundamentals of brand building, those stay the same.
It's like that saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Exactly. So how do we take these timeless principles and use them in today's world? Well, Lensink has some interesting thoughts on brand assets, too. He says they're not just for advertising anymore. They're critical for content as well.
So not just thinking logos here.
Nope. It's bigger than that. Think of it this way. A strong brand asset is like a visual shortcut.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, take McDonald's, right? Those golden arches, you see them, and instantly you know what it is, what they stand for. No explanation needed.
It's true. You don't even need a sign that says McDonald's. You just know.
And that's the power of a well-crafted brand asset. It works everywhere. Across platforms, across every piece of content, creating that instant recognition.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So strong brand assets are key. But they don't just magically appear, do they?
Unfortunately not. They need to be carefully designed, thoughtfully considered.
So where do you even begin?
It's about pinpointing those elements that are truly unique to your brand, and then really importantly, using them consistently. Think about the ING lion, the NCOI pole vaulter, even those super simple but effective Albert Heijn slogans. That is it lekkere van Albert Heijn. Recognizable, memorable, and they work because they're consistent.
So you've got your brand, you've got your story, you've got your assets. Now what? How do you put it all together in a way that resonates?
Well, Lensink introduces this really helpful framework he calls the complete picture.
Okay, I like the sound of that. Tell me more.
So he says that instead of creating separate briefs for, say, your advertising agency and your content team, they should all be working together from the get-go, using the same core idea.
I see. So breaking...
When everyone's on the same page, drawing inspiration from those same core insights, that's when the magic really starts to happen. You end up with a campaign that tells that consistent story. No matter where your audience encounters it, online, offline, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And crucially, Lensink doesn't just throw this big idea out there and leave you hanging. He breaks it all down step by step.
Always helpful.
Right. So he says it all begins with a really solid insight, really understanding your audience, their needs, desires, what makes them tick.
So doing your homework.
Exactly. And that insight should then inform the narrative, the story you want to tell about your brand.
So it's not just about coming up with a cool story. It's about a story that actually means something to someone.
You got it. And from there, you develop your big idea, the creative concept that brings that narrative to life.
And that's where the fun starts.
Right. That's where you get to be creative. And this is what Lensink calls finding that twist, that unexpected element that makes your campaign stand out from the crowd.
Love that. The element of surprise.
Exactly. He uses that Royal Canin campaign we talked about as a great example of this. The twist being that the dog wakes up back in their normal life after living like royalty.
So good. That unexpected element makes it so memorable.
Totally. But then you need to figure out how to actually execute that idea across all your different platforms. He stresses the importance of having a home base for your content. So a central hub where people can go to learn more.
So your website, for example.
Yeah. It could be your website, a specific landing page, a blog. And he also reminds us that even the most brilliant content needs a little push to get seen. He calls this media pressure, which basically means making sure your campaign actually reaches your target audience.
Because amazing content doesn't do much good if nobody sees it.
Exactly. And then there's the rise of branded partnerships.
Which can be tricky to navigate.
Right. He argues they can be amazing for reaching new audiences. However,
always a however.
Isn't there? Always. He cautions against just handing over your entire content strategy to a media company. You have to stay in control of your brand message.
It's about finding the right balance.
Exactly. And what I really appreciate about Lensink is he walks the walk. He doesn't just talk theory. He shares some really cool case studies of brands that are absolutely killing it with their content marketing.
Always love a good case study.
Right, like that ABN AMR Mies Pearson campaign. It's a fantastic example of how content can be used to tackle those sensitive, often avoided topics in a relatable and engaging way.
Absolutely. And I thought his take on NCOI was really interesting too.
Oh yeah, with their pole vaulting campaign.
That's the one.
He said they could be doing even more with content. Like, He suggested they develop a format that celebrates the heroes of the pole vault, people who have overcome challenges and achieved incredible things through dedication and hard work.
So taking that existing brand idea and translating it into a fresh new content strategy.
Exactly. And what I really like about Lensink's approach is this emphasis on authenticity, keeping it real.
It's so refreshing in a world of overly polished, corporate-sounding content.
Right. He wants brands to ditch the jargon, be more human, more relatable.
Be more approachable, more real.
Totally. He even encourages brands to embrace what he calls the 5 minutes to midnight approach.
Okay, I have to ask, what in the world does that mean?
Basically creating a sense of urgency, inspiring action, but in a hopeful way.
So not doom and gloom, but more like, let's do this.
Exactly. It's about tapping into people's hopes, aspirations, and showing them how your brand can help them achieve their goals.
It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
100%. If you say you're all about sustainability, your actions need to reflect that.
Consumers see right through that, don't they?
They do. And actually, Lensink even suggests brands need to start thinking more like entrepreneurs.
Oh, how so?
He argues entrepreneurs have this natural understanding of their customers' needs. They're not afraid to take risks, experiment, and adapt as they go. He thinks brands can learn a lot from that mentality.
Be more agile, responsive to change.
Right. And most importantly, more willing to listen to your audience. He also talks about this whole purpose-driven marketing trend, which we know can be a bit of a buzzword. He says it's great in theory, but just slapping a purpose statement on your website, it's not enough.
Because it's got to be more than just words.
Exactly. You have to truly live and breathe that purpose. It's got to be ingrained in everything you do.
It has to be authentic.
Exactly. He encourages brands to think, why do we exist? What value do we bring? And that relevance should be baked into everything you create.
It's about making content that's not just engaging or entertaining, but also meaningful.
Yes. And of course, he circles back to the power of language. Ditch the jargon, find your voice, and use it effectively.
Like Nike's Just Do It. 3 simple words, but so powerful.
Right. It shows you the right words can have a huge impact.
Absolutely. We've covered a lot of ground with Lensink, haven't we?
We have. It's been quite the deep dive.
From ditching the jargon to embracing those 5 minutes to midnight moments, he's given us so much to think about.
He has. But you know what I find really interesting? There's this underlying question throughout the book that he keeps hinting at, but doesn't explicitly answer.
Oh, tell me more. I'm intrigued. What's the question?
Well, he keeps touching on this idea, this future, where the line between content and advertising becomes almost non-existent.
You know, when you say it like that, we're already seeing it happen, aren't we?
Right. Think about those high-budget documentaries brands are putting out, or those influencer campaigns that feel more like mini reality shows than ads.
Brands are becoming storytellers.
Exactly. And as technology keeps evolving, who's to say brands won't become full-blown media companies in their own right?
It's not that far-fetched of an idea. Look at Red Bull. They've got their own media house. Or GoPro, with their whole empire built on user-generated content. They're almost there already.
Exactly. So it begs the question, what if, instead of just creating content to support your brand, you flip the script? What if you built your entire brand around content?
Now, that's a pretty radical thought.
It is, but it's a shift that some really forward-thinking brands are already starting to make. And I think it's something we'll see a lot more of in the coming years.
So where does that leave us? What's the biggest takeaway for our listeners from our deep dive into Lensink's wisdom?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the possibilities are truly endless when you embrace the power of content in brand building.
It's about connecting with your audience on a whole new level.
Exactly, but you have to be willing to go all in. Make content a core part of your strategy or risk being left behind.
Lensink's book is a great place to start, but it's up to each of us to take his insights and figure out what they mean for our own brands.
Find your voice, your story, your way of connecting with your audience in an authentic and engaging way.
Beautifully put. So as we wrap up, we want to leave you with this. Think about your brand story. What are those assets that make you instantly recognizable? And how can you use content to build a brand that's not just memorable, but truly unforgettable?
Because in a world saturated with content, that's the ultimate goal, isn't it?
It really is. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Until next time.